Hello everyone, I'm Cesar Rodriguez, and I would like to thank TAMIU ARC so that we were able to have this presentation. On the screen provided, I do end up having the QR link and the QR codes for data that we end up having. The data that is on, it was also previously used from books, and the book that we ended up, well, that I ended up finding it in was Advanced Multivariate Statistical Method Practical Applications, and Interpretation 6th edition from Craig Martel and Reinhardt Rachel Vankit. So aside from that, we're going to end up talking about a little bit of Jamovi. Jamovi, to start with, it's a statistical software, and there are several others that you could end up having, such as SPSS, Jamovi, or RStudio. Jamovi, it's kind of the link between SPSS and RStudio, because our SPSS has more of a drop-down menu. You're able to access your drop-down menu and click on the parts that you need for your data. Also, that does end up coming with a con. Just because you can click something doesn't mean you should click it, because it might show that you have information, but it's not related or in the right coded frame, such as nominal, ordinal, interval, or ID. That's the reason why you have to be careful with what you click and how it's being used. Aside from that, Jamovi, we end up having it be used. You're able to download it. It's free and public access. We are able to end up having it be released on Windows in its current and solid state, Mac OS in its current and solid state, Linux, and Chrome OS. So you are able to use it on different platforms, but if you're trying to use it on a mobile cellular device, you're not really able to use Jamovi. Aside from that, if you try downloading it on an Apple tablet, you're not able to really use the information. You're just able to open the library, so you cannot import your information. From here, we do end up having the SAV file, which is a SPSS file and an Excel file that you would have to transform all the data. For today, I will be using the SAV file because it already has all the transformations already made for the data. So before I start, what I would want to end up having is Jamovi being open, which is this icon. At the current moment, it is version 2.25 at its solid state. The way that we end up having Jamovi here is we have a variable view and your output. So for the variable view, it has 8 columns and around 50 rows. Each column would end up representing a variable, and rows would be each survey that you end up having within it. So if I end up clicking here on data, you can end up seeing that you're able to hit the normal ones, which are paste, cut, copy. You can edit to go forward or back, or undo and redo. You have setup, compute, transform, and then you can either add a column or variable, delete a column or variable, have your filter, and then aside from that, you're also able to add a survey or delete a survey. Once we end up hitting variables, you have individual variables that you're able to end up seeing. And once we end up seeing some of these bubbles, that ends up meaning the type of variable that you're able to have. You can edit a variable, you can compute, transform, add or delete a variable, and you're also able to filter it out. When we end up going to edit, we have some of the same information, which is you can paste, copy, cut. You can also undo and redo. You're able to bold, italicize, underline. You can have a strike through as well. Aside from that, you have your subscript and superscripts. You're also able to end up highlighting your background and change your font color. And all the output that ends up being generated is already ready for SPSS. And under edits, you're able to end up having it for the paragraph stanza you want and bullet points as well. You can insert certain formulas. You can have a code block. For instance, if you're using it in R, you would type in the code block and it would stop the data from moving on. And then you're also able to change your heading styles, and you can add a link such as a hyperlink. So now that I have some of the information already set, the analysis would end up being exploration, t-test, ANOVA, regression, frequency, and factor analysis. You're able to add more modules through you're able to add more modules through the module plus sign, and you're also able to end up having it for RStudio, end up having more of a Jamovi library, and have it stacked all the way through, whether you want to end up using Walrus or another type of information or statistical software. It all depends on what you have and what the data you're presenting, because it could be larger than the file selects, or it could also end up having it be the amount of data that is being used. And your teacher is able to end up helping you figure that out more to see if Jamovi is a good fit for your data set, or if you could use something else like SPSS, RStudio, JASP, or something else, because you could also end up using SQL. So open a data file, we're able to end up hitting this hamburger right here. Go down to open. It's easier if we end up selecting browse if you already have your information. And for this PC, I'm able to end up seeing it under downloads because I already have it downloaded, and it's open as a CV, as an SVA file, which is the Jamovi, well, the SPSS file. Once we open the information, it sends us to another sheet. And from here, the 8 that we started with is already continued and highlighted throughout. So we do end up having some of our information. This is able to go down to about 1,500 surveys that were used, and a lot of variables with its row count, which is right here as well. And a lot of variables. Each one of these, for as the ladder steps, the bubbles, and the ruler, which is further down, ends up having a significant value that we're able to use it. So if we want to end up seeing our variables, you're able to click the variable, and it ends up having the measure type. The measure type could be nominal, ordinal, continuous, or ID. ID is a special kind where it doesn't actually run the process. So if you end up having the ID number of a survey participant, it just shows the ID number. It doesn't run it in RStudio or Jamovi. Aside from that, you have nominal, which is just the number, ordinal, which is the list and ranking order that you can end up having it in, continuous, which would be your interval and ratio level, which your interval would be, let's say, 5 times tables of 5, 10, 15, 20, and the spacing between it. And your ratio would end up being anywhere from an absolute 0 or a true 0, and continuous, which could be towards infinity. From here, you do end up having your integral type. And if you end up having it as continuous, it wouldn't be so much an integral, but a decimal, because the decimal is continuous. So that's why you can end up having issues on how you select your data type and measurement type. You're also able to end up saying how you want to end up filling out missing values, whether you want to end up putting a 0, 98, 99, if the participant didn't access or acknowledge that variable within the data set, or if it was skipped. Aside from that, you can retain unused levels in the analysis. So if there's a 1,500 participants that were able to give you the information and were presented within your survey, you can either choose to run it, or you can end up having it where it ends up having it as not applicable, since some survey participants did not provide that information. You could have it as not applicable, 99, 0, or leave it blank altogether, such as Mac College, which is right here. And I'm gonna scroll back over here to age. You're able to end up having it where you select the main variable. You're able to select the age of the respondent, so you give it your title. From here, you're able to end up selecting the level that you want to end up having it, or you're able to add more. So for instance, here you're able to add enter level. Let's say died. So if they died, you're able to end up adding it, and you could want to, sorry, I think I clicked it wrong. Enter level, you want to end up entering level 666. And from here, you're able to give it where the participants has passed, and that's the way you're able to end up choosing it for your code. You would have to change the way that you end up coding it here, but you could say 666 could end up being that your participant passed away and didn't continue within the study. Aside from that, we're able to also click on the information here. For instance, exploration, you can do descriptive statistics, and you can have all three of the windows open at the same time, which could end up having your survey information, your descriptive statistics, and your results that end up showing. So for instance, if you want to end up selecting age, sex, education, income, and work stats, some of this information ends up having issues where it says NAN, and there's no information that could be derived from this. That's also why you have to view your data, understand what you're using, because you are able to click the information. It doesn't mean it's going to give you information that is accurate for your data set. So it would give you NAN. So that would be one that you might want to end up reverting back and turning it back towards your descriptive statistics options you can choose instead of the variables you're using. You can also split it. So you can end up choosing the option. It would have to end up having either an ordinal or a nominal variable, and you add that into your split, and you can end up saying if the person continued working or they stopped working. And once you have it here, it also ends up showing you if there's any missing. You have your missing data, your mean, which is you add all of them together and divide by the number of participants. So you would end up having your mean score, which would end up being 447 with your mean population of 1,500 divided by the amount of people that answered it correctly, because some of them could choose not to answer. And aside from that, you also have your median, which is you have all your information in order, and the one that ends up being in the middle, your standard deviation, which is how far away the information is or the plot is away from its mean score. So the one that is within its middle range from its bell curve, how far away it is. You have your minimum and maximum, which would end up being the minimum, let's say age, or the maximum age that the respondent is. So for this information, it could stay in your results, and you can choose a different type of test. For instance, you can choose a t-test and a one sample t-test. So your one sample t-test would need an interval or ratio level. And let's say we want to end up selecting wife education and husband education. So here we do end up having the one sample t-test, and we can also end up saying that we want to use Bayesian factor if you're familiar with it, or Wilcox rank if you're familiar with it. Our mean score would have to have a 95% confidence interval, and that would also change for your ANOVA and your MANOVA or MANICOVA. And the effect is also your confidence interval as well. You can also end up having it be descriptive. You can show the plot for descriptive plot, and you can assume for normality if there is any normality, or have a QQ plot. And it would end up showing either a line here or where your measurement is. So I will return these two and show you a different one. For instance, education difficulty. So here you end up having it for your plot as it shows for your mean score, which would be one straight line, and your QQ plot, which would end up showing almost a chi-square of the information that you have within the plot showing a linear regression since it is continuous. And if there was a curve, it would end up having a different factor which could change its p-value. Aside from that, we're also able to do an ANOVA. For instance, we can do a one-way ANOVA. And the one-way ANOVA, we're able to end up having our dependent variables be wife education, husband education, Ryan income model, so it's in producing, and education difference. And you're able to end up grouping it. Let's say you want to divide it by degrees.
There's a question in the chat by Andre.
Where is the question? I cannot see the question. Okay. Over here, you're also able to end up seeing the information, which is DF, which is. If you have a question. Sorry. Degrees of freedom, how many degrees of freedom you have between 4 and 1, and you have your p-value, which would end up showing the potential degrees of freedom away from its mean score and how close it is. From here, you're able to end up having your descriptive tables, and it'll show less than high school, junior college, bachelor, and graduate for each one of these, and it would show it in the amount of people that are there, your mean score, your standard deviation, and the score that you end up having after. So the next one we end up having is your descriptive plot. So you can end up showing each individual plot for its plot within its mean score to see if it does end up having to be continuous and it grows upward. Aside from that, you can check for homogeneity test, normality, and have a QQ plot. The QQ plot could be sometimes seen as a chi-square, but it depends on which variables you were looking for and which ones you were looking at. So as we scroll back up, we're able to see that our information is presented here as a one-way ANOVA. We're able to see the group that is within it because this is the one that we're dividing it by, which is the degree itself. You can end up choosing the normality test, which is the Sharpo wings, and the homogeneity test of Levine. And each plot ends up having it different because you want to end up showing its homogeneity test and its QQ plot. So it's divided by each section, and it continues as you go scroll down. So with ANOVA, you could end up having it where you want to end up looking at one ANOVA and maybe 2 or 3 ANOVAs because that's your dependent variables and how you want to group them. But the reason why we want to be careful with ANOVAs is because the confidence interval needs to be 95%. So if you end up having one ANOVA that is good within your framework, you might want to end up having multivariate because if you end up having 2 or more, it changes its confidence interval being from 95 to lower. So if you end up having 3 to 5, it lowers its confidence interval and it could drop below the 95% that it would be used for its descriptive statistics and have your information not be valid anymore, which could bring up questions of the way the data is being represented or how it is misrepresented. So from here, we're able to end up choosing Manakova. And from Manakova, you could end up having, again, wife education, husband education, income, husband hours, wife hours, and education difference. And you can factor it again by, let's say this time you want to factor it by marital status, and this would show the factor of each one. That's 2 or more levels. Oh, that one's yes or no. That's why that one didn't work. So this ends up showing the way that they have their job and the way that it's shown with ease. I'll leave that one there because I'm going to show you something else. So here, let's end up saying degree. And this ends up having a breakdown by degree for the mean scores within each, whether it's residual or the degree type. And it shows its mean square and its F factor that you end up having and its p-value for its univariate test. And this shows how it's done for its test that you end up having, for its value, the freedom, the degrees of freedom 1 and 2, and its p-value. You can also end up choosing to see the Sharple-Wilks test and the chi-square quantities or quaternions to see if it goes within its p-value. As it starts here, it's following its linear regression, but you have variables that are at the top. So that is the reason why we end up having the p-value be 0.001. So it is strong in its interval part, but you do have some outliers that change its test. So it wouldn't be 0.0. And then you end up having the box homogeneity of conveyance matrices of box 2 and its degrees of freedom aside from its p-value and the Wilks of its W and p-value as well. So from here, you have information and data that you could be able to use. And next, you're able to edit some of this information. So we could choose to not see this information right now, lower some of this information, and scroll up to see which one we would like to edit. So from here, you can choose to edit. Instead of just results, you could say results for married couples. Married couples, income and education. So you can choose to have it here. You can choose to have a second heading. And you can also choose to end up having a hyperlink. The hyperlink, you're able to end up, sorry. And second heading, so it's bolded, and you can choose to end up having a hyperlink. You can save it, and then you're also able to end up saving it as you highlight this information and still, wait, at the bottom of a different test, my bad, you're able to end up having its hyperlink in it. So you can select the information and it continues on. All this information is already set up in APA style. And for here, you can choose which type of test you want to end up having and show this information on the next one. So if you want to end up having some of your data be exported, you can continue on your results. You can also copy or remove some of your data. So let's say you have this test at the bottom, you want to remove some. You can select to remove one of the options and choose to remove it out of your data set. You can duplicate it, remove it, export, or copy. So at the beginning with all your results, you're able to export all your information. You can save it as a file and it'll be saved to your computer on the one that you chose. So for this, we're able to end up saying Jamovi married couples income and education. So from here, you're able to export your information. It can be saved as a PDF or which type would you want. You can have it as a zip file or web page as well. You can also end up switching how you want to export it from its browse tab of where you want to have the information. You can add it into your desktop or downloads. and save your information here for it to be exported. And your information would show up in one moment. It's not there at the moment. Give me 1 moment. Okay. You said documents, right? I'm just going to re-show it.
Downloads?
No, I think I put it. I'm going to re-export it as a PDF file. Jamovi, married couples, income, and exported to Jamovi income as a PDF. Without syncing your data. And it would end up showing your information here, but you're also able to have click on it and be able to transform it in, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet as well. And this is already set up for your graphs, and your graphs are able to be made into APAA style already. So you don't have to change much for its information here, but if you want to, you're able to do that with Excel. And for instance, here we can select it. Here,
Show us how to.
charts. From there, you end up having it for edit, and from edit, you're able to choose which charts and graphs you want. The charts are already made here, and you can end up choosing if you want to end up having it show the mean, medium, mode. You can show its skewness, if there's any change, its variance, its range, standard deviation for its plot. Aside from that, you can also end up showing whether you want it as a histogram, a box plot, a violin plot. Let me scroll down. To ANOVA. ANOVA, you can end up having it be its post hoc or Tukey and show its results. And you can test it and show its homogeneity of the results. Once we scroll up to its descriptive, we can also end up choosing whether we want to end up having its bar plot, QQ plot, and mean. So as we scroll down, show it. We're able to end up having some of its plots already here. They're already APA styled. You can change its size as well if you need to. And choosing the variable would also end up saying whether you want to end up having it be your X for your dependent variable and your Y as your independent variable. So it changes on what you are looking for, how many variables you are looking at, and its range within its variable. The violin plot is one of the ones that ends up looking almost like a violin. Could also end up saying that it looks like a stingray, and its box plot is its box within it, and it shows how close some of your variables are from its mean score all the way to its outliers. And you can end up having your watch whirls, which again is your QQ plot. Your QQ plot ends up showing your regression. And you can end up having some that are not within its linear regression, so it could change its p-value, and some that curve at the end, so it also changes its p-value since it is not following a straight line for its linear regression. You can also have it where it's the count box as well, comparing it between males and females on which item of work it is, and the different types of box or violin plots that you can choose, because you could choose one or both. And your bar plot, which actually shows which one is your highest and lowest in this case for its standard, and how many individual cases could be there within its line. Or from here would be 0.1 for its line. You also end up having its income because we're doing counts, and you're showing the count variable of its data as it progresses by its income generation. Each one of these continues because we selected 4 variables and we split them by rich work. So you would end up having this 4 different ways for each one of what it is allowed to show you, whether it is nominal, ordinal, or interval, and it shows what type of information you're able to use within its area. And at the top, I'm going to select where you can see its variance, range, and IQR. So you can end up seeing how it ends up showing its skewness, standard error of skewness, maximum, minimum, its range, which went from 64 to 52. And it changes for each one of them. So for instance, if we were to use it in sex, its range wouldn't really count because that variable is a nominal. So it is a yes or no or dummy variable. So its range would be 1. You also have its IQR variance, standard deviation, which is how far it is away from its mean score. Your mode, which is the one that comes out the most. In this case, it would be continue working at 43 and stop working at 33. Its mean, which is if you end up having them all in a row again, from its least to maximum, and its mean would end up being the one that's in the middle, which could be either a decimal or a whole number. Its median, I mean, and its mean score would be adding them all up and dividing by the number of variables or surveys that you are using, and its n is the population or descriptive statistics.
What are some common issues?
Some common issues that you're able to end up having is you want to end up having some, give me one second. Sorry, data. So some common issues that you can end up having is within its data itself, you can end up having some that is not answered or not applicable. And you can also end up having the issue of the data being used here, but when you want to end up seeing it for its modules and choosing your modules in the beginning. In the beginning, there was a plus sign here for you to add your modules. Which if I open Jamovi again, it should show you. here, if you want to end up adding some of your modules, for instance, our studio, its library, you would have to select and install each one individually onto your own personal computer or to the one that you end up using for a virtual desktop. So that could be one common issue. Another issue that could occur is you downloaded R and you would have to select a code block of how you want to end up stopping the data from being used within its code. So you can end up choosing something like here, choose code block, and you type in the code. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was data table of one of the ways you can use it. Sorry, I think I put the wrong code. Of data table, and you write it the way they would be for R, and you can stop it from showing this or tell it to show you this table as it runs its software program. If you want to end up increasing this for it to go between R Studio or to SPSS. You have a question? Yes. Give me 1 second so I could resize it. Compute, you're able to end up having compute. You can choose a variable, for instance, degree. Okay, where to go? So you can choose a variable you want to end selecting. So let's say you want to select degree. Give it the description of degree levels. And you can choose the type of formula you want from its drop-down menu because you're able to end up selecting your variable here for degree type. And you can select the kind of information you want, whether you want to end up using its math for its sorts, statistical software. If you want to end up having it be its mean, mid, mode for its V, you can also end up choosing whether you want to end up having it as an if statement or ifing miss, or it does not apply. You can also see if you want to end up having it for your text, if you want to have it contain or be split for its text and value within its number format. You can use it for references where you can look up and match. So let's say at this point you want to end up having it where it automatically looks it up from a separate area in R, and it can check its library to see if it works with it and is a good match. You can also end up having some of its filters for music, but that depends on the type of information you're showing. And its samples or rows for its surveys that you end up having it, depending on what type of information you're gathering. And over here, it allows you to move between variables. Would there be any more questions from the audience?
Hi, yes. Cesar, may I ask some general question about this software?
Yes.
So, what is the reason we need to use this particular one? I thought, our university, we have SPSS.
The reason you would use SPSS?
No, use this new software. Jamovi?
With it? Yes. The reason we would use Jamovi or SPSS or any of the data files is to show the statistical variability that we're able to use within its platforms. And some of them also end up having certain numbers that it has in its formula or the way its formula is written out or used. And that could end up changing from one data set to another. I mean, one statistical program to another, for instance, SPSS could end up having it be slightly changed. Jamovi and our studio as well. Each one of them ends up changing the way that its information for its formula could be used and how it is filtered out and what's being presented.
So what is the
So Jamovi is used more frequently now because it is a free open source software that constantly changes. That's why there is a current version and a solid version. The solid version would be the information that is already linked and it's safe, whereas its current version could have bugs.
okay, so then what is the advantage of this Jamovi over SPSS? Does it have the same power like SPSS?
It has some similarities, but the advantage of it for this would be Jamovi is free and open source, whereas SPSS you would have to pay for that software, its licensing, and the reason why you end up wanting it could be whether you want the pro version or its normal version. That's why some of it would end up being used from TAMIU ARC and would need permission for you to gain access to some sources such as SPSS for it to be involved in your classroom.
So then what is the function SPSS have but this Jamovi doesn't have?
It runs more statistical analysis, such as Bayesian statistics. Aside from that, you're also able to have some of the information be used that is more on R. And R, as I said, you would have to type everything in. So if you have even a period missing or its code is off by a little bit, it would stop running its function. It would make you go back and retype. And that's why SPSS is more of a drop-down menu. Jamovi is more of a fusion between it, since you're able to drop down and choose the information, but you don't have to type your code out. And it allows you to access your data, change your data, show Bayesian statistics. You can also show a MANOVA, MANICOVA for multivariate analysis and different analysis and statistical packages. I don't end up having them added on because this is a laboratory computer and you would have to have access to add each individual icon or added part of its library to extend it. For instance, if you want to end up having it be exported to SPSS or for it to be exported as an RStudio, you would need its package to be uploaded first so you can add it in.
So does this have AMOS like SPSS?
Have what?
AMOS.
No, it does not.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You could probably see it as one of the module packages as an add-on, like you could increase it, or it could end up being one that could be developed later on in the future, depending on the type of creator that ends up coding it in for it to be used later.
I see. So then where's the place we can learn? We can, do they have special community? You can often to get those new updates to learn all those, how it works.
From here, the community where you're able to add it would be on this section where you have add module in the beginning before you open a file. And you're able to end up seeing some of this information. For instance, down here you can have advanced meditation models, Bayesian method. You can continue into survey plots and choose which one you would like to use. Because not everyone would need to end up having Death Watch as one of its installation packages. You could have it on there, but you don't need it all the time. You could also have Walrus for its robust use in ANOVA, but some people that are not using it for ANOVA and just want to end up doing a test, they wouldn't necessarily need to install all the packages. So that's where you would have to read each individual one of what it contains to see if it fits your needs. And also be aware that some of them could be added, which is why you're able to see your installed ones that are already there available available that you're able to add, and you can see if it's loaded or not.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Appreciate.
You're welcome. Are there any more questions? Don't I need it to have the SAV like add-on first? Because I don't have the SAV add-on, it won't allow me to export it as SAV. That's why I had it as PDF, and PDF you're not really able to change, but you can choose. This one? It's the bundle with Jamovi. And again, since this is a work computer, you need to have access to be able to add on more packages. Because that's why I don't know if we can or cannot install. Since some of them are work computers and you need to have the password as admin.
Yeah, transform.
Did it select it? Oh, yes, and we're able to add Walrus as the statistical package. So if we go here, we would have to find one that says SPSS.
No, well, yeah.
I don't know where it would be.
That's okay. Can you see if you can figure out the other question? Transforming the negative values, right? Into what? Transform negative values into what?
We can end up choosing its source code. Let's say you want to end up having it be life.
I guess if there's negative values, I don't know if any of those variables have negative values.
Not that I've seen. Where you can end up having here use transform and you can create a new transformation. Or you keep its source and then from its source you can end up saying that you want to end up presenting it. I want to say as negative. It isn't equal. You want to recode it as -1 is what I'm assuming. Because it's minus itself. So I was like, I think it's
Yeah, like you change it to.
yes. And you want it to be presented as nominal. And then you would have to look all the way at the end to see if it transformed it.
The transform variable next to the other one.
It's happy.
Right.
Yes. Because it's create new. So you could say it equals -2. You want it to show. To continue. And at the moment, I'm not sure how to end up having it go from positive to negative using transform. Yes.
That's a user.
Are there any more questions from the audience? And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This video would also end up being uploaded and changed, edit, for it to be used as TAMIU ARC for its archive, and some of its information would also be used for the TAMIU YouTube and as shameless plug, so that way more students are able to end up seeing this data for Jamovi and figure out how to use Jamovi later in the future. Some of the questions will be edited out, so that way it would show how to end up having its information and source be used for Jamovi and its platform for its statistical purposes. Thank you so much.